Welcome back to Wake Up with Nubian Tigers Talk, a podcast brought to you by a group of Black Princetonians where we talk about issues impacting our Black and Brown communities. My name is Michelle Jacobs, and I'm here as always with my co-host, Ray Smalls. So, Ray, almost every week this year, some white nationalist politician is trying to force us further and further back towards the Jim Crow era lifestyle of the South. And it's mind-boggling every week that goes by.
I only have to go back to my parents' stories about some of the things that they went through, to have that reminder. I never thought that those kinds of things would be what we'd be up against in this generation. But I mean, thinking about that on a positive front, we did get that great or good call by the Supreme Court about the gerrymandering going on in Alabama. And now that state had to use the amended gerrymandering, or I should say, the county boundaries for this upcoming election.
Right. So, and then you can throw on top of that Louisiana and Ohio, all the states that are trying to eliminate the ability of Black people to express their political will through voting.
Exactly.
Those efforts too are being led primarily by our former president and the person who's vying to succeed him, who is the governor of the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis.
Or as Trump calls him, Ron DeSanctimonious.
There are a few other names too, but I don't think we should say that. So anyway, earlier this year, DeSantis suspended the duly elected state attorney for Orange County. And so we're very happy and pleased to have her come on the show today to discuss what is happening in Florida and her response to DeSantis' attempt to remove her from office. Our guest today is Monique Houghton-Worrell, who was originally from New York City, but she made Central Florida her home in 1996. After receiving her law degree from the University of Florida in 1999, she began her career as a public defender in Orange County, Florida. She then went on to private practice, where she continued to focus on criminal justice. Monique later became a clinical law professor at the University of Florida, where she trained law students who aspired to practice criminal law. At UF, Monique developed the Your Future, Your Choice program to teach youth their rights and responsibilities as citizens, and she was also the founding director of the law school's Criminal Justice Center. Upon leaving UF, she became the founding director of the Conviction Integrity Unit in the State Attorney's Office in Orange County, where she led the investigation of claims for wrongful conviction. It was that experience that made her realize that change in the criminal legal system was critical and must come from within. Prior to being elected as state attorney, she served as chief legal officer at a nonprofit organization focused on criminal justice reform. In 2020, Monique ran for the state attorney's office for Florida's 9th Judicial Circuit. She was elected in November of 2020 and served as the chief prosecutor until August 9th, 2023. At the time, Monique was the only African-American female serving as state attorney in Florida. Welcome to the show, Monique.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Monique, why don't you help our listeners understand the process of becoming a state attorney? How did you become a state attorney?
Okay, so I'll tell you the typical process, and then I will inform you that the way it usually happens is not the way it's currently happening. So typically, people are elected to become prosecutors. In 2020 of March, I filed to become the elected state attorney, and then I stood up a campaign and I ran and was elected in the primary in August of 2020, and then in the general of November of 2020, and that's how I became the state attorney for the 9th Judicial Circuit of Florida. However, lately, the governor's just been appointing people state attorney, which is very different because while United States attorneys are typically appointed, that's not how state attorneys in the state of Florida come to become state attorneys.
Okay, so we're going to get to that, but first, let me ask you, when you say you were elected for a particular district, what area or what group of people does your office actually represent?
So the Ninth Circuit is Orange and Osceola counties, and it's more widely known as the Orlando area.
Okay, so you're in the Disney, in the
Yes.
Disney, yeah, okay. Lots of stuff popping off in that little Disney area.
It's true. It's true, and we all have something in common.
Say hello to Bob Iger for me when you get a chance, would you?
I'll get right on that.
Okay, so people may not actually, people outside of Florida may not actually recognize your name, but they recognize that something terrible happened to you recently when Governor Ron DeSantis suspended you from your office. And in fact, you're the second prosecutor he has taken out of office. So share with us what happened exactly and what you think is behind his movements.
So a year ago, in August of 2022, Andrew Warren was suspended from office, and he was the state attorney for Hillsborough County, which is the Tampa area. And at that point, I knew. I had been given wind of it earlier because when I was elected, believe it or not, someone said to me, the governor wants to have you removed. Now, this was when I was elected, so I hadn't even taken office yet. I hadn't even had an opportunity to do anything that the governor might find to be offensive. But I was told at that time that the governor wanted to have me removed. So in August, when Andrew Warren was removed, it immediately came back to me that, oh, well, yeah, they said that the governor wanted to have me removed, and I'm very likely next. I believe that Andrew Warren was really just political collateral to get to me so that the governor did not have to contend with people saying that this was a race-based removal. But I was always his focus. So what did that look like? In February of 2023, there was a mass shooting in the Orlando area. A 19-year-old individual who had a criminal history as a juvenile prior to my taking office took a gun and went through a neighborhood and killed 3 people, one of them being a 9-year-old girl, one of them being a news reporter, and another one being a woman who was a bystander in the area. And that immediately called upon the governor and Senator Scott to begin calling for my removal because I was somehow responsible for these actions. It was a huge, media hit, and everyone started saying that, I was responsible for these things happening, but there wasn't really any facts behind how and why I was responsible for these things happening, which is probably not surprising, right? There's no facts based to the rhetoric that was being spewed. And eventually what came out was that, one, the criminal history that this kid had was as a juvenile. So he was a juvenile when any of his criminal history took place, with the exception of a possession of marijuana charge that took place while I was the state attorney. And in Florida, as in many places across the country, we're not doing very much with possession of marijuana. So there isn't any logical sentence that I could have given behind a possession of marijuana that would have logically stopped this individual from committing the mass shooting. But by then, a whole media campaign of disinformation had been done. The sheriff came out and said that this individual had been arrested 20 times and had 0 convictions, when the majority of those arrests took place while he was a juvenile, and juveniles aren't convicted, so it would be logical that no matter how many arrests he had, there wouldn't be any convictions, because we don't refer to the disposition of juvenile cases as convictions. But it was all done with the intent to set up what would months later become my removal. by making individuals believe that I was soft on crime, that the community was less safe with me at the helm, that I was responsible for every crime that happened while I was state attorney. And this sort of disinformation campaign went on for months, right up until my removal on August the 9th.
Wow. So
Amazing.
that is amazing.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
Michelle?
go ahead, Greg, go ahead.
So, so Monique, when they originally let go of Andrew Warren, what did they use as justifications or reasons for his removal before they eventually removed you?
So the reason for Andrew Warren's removal was because Andrew Warren signed a brief that opposed prosecution for abortion. He signed a commitment saying that he would not use his office as the elected prosecutor to prosecute women for having abortions or to prosecute doctors for giving abortions. Now, it was interesting because there was a lot of controversy around my declining to sign that very same petition. But I knew that that petition was a setup. I knew it was. And I said no, and you know, all of the abortion rights people reached out to me and they were like, Monique, the community needs to hear from you. I said, I cannot sign this petition because if I signed this petition, I didn't even think at that point that it would be used as a mechanism for my removal. But to go along with what happened when Aramis Ayala, my predecessor, said that she would not seek the death penalty, and they removed all death penalty cases to a different circuit. I thought that if I signed that petition that they would remove all abortion cases to a different circuit, and that by me signing that pledge, I would be giving false hope to the constituents of my community because they would believe that they wouldn't be prosecuted, and what would ultimately happen is that they would be prosecuted, just not by my office. So I said, I will not sign the pledge. And there were people who were very angry. There was an organization that actually sent me a letter on the day that Andrew Warren was suspended. I received the letter admonishing me for not signing the pledge. And then Andrew Warren was suspended, and the very main reason cited, in addition to some other non-prosecution policies that he had entered into, that was at the top of the list of reasons why he was suspended.
So you mentioned the campaign of disinformation. Was there any effort to push back on that, or what was happening to get the actual facts out to the public while this campaign was going on?
We tried. I hired media specialists. I hired public information officers. I did sit-down interviews with the news. I hired a political strategist. We were just out-resourced. The news was very much a part, and by the news I mean Channel 9 News specifically in my area, was very much a part of the disinformation. And they were from the very beginning. Within a month or so of me being in office, they published a story saying that I had a COVID-19 policy that meant that no one would go to prison for anything ever, including gun crimes. It wasn't based in fact. There was no such policy, but they still put out, you know, a story saying that they had a source that said it was so. And you know, that was from the very beginning. So I think it was a concerted effort. And although we tried, we weren't able to stop the train once it started.
So I'm going to jump in with one more question, Ray, and then I'll turn it to you. So I heard you speak at a news conference, and you indicated that your office had some investigations of the sheriff's office going on. So tell us a little bit about that and whether you think it impacted the governor's decision.
So the Osceola County Sheriff's Office was one of the law enforcement agencies who played a crucial role in my removal, in that the numbers that DeSantis cites to for non-prosecution of drug trafficking cases all come out of Osceola County. Now, this wasn't surprising to me because Osceola County Sheriff's Office was under investigation by my office for corruption, essentially, for narrating false reports, for signing reports and notarizing them when someone else is the person who signed it. So someone else other than the person signing is the person who wrote the report or witnessed the facts that were contained within the report. So just fraudulent reports, along with my investigation regarding the excessive use of force in officer-involved critical incidents, one involving a kid who was shot and killed for allegedly being involved in the stealing of a pizza and Pokemon cards to the amount of $45. Another kid that was set on fire when a deputy tased him at a gas pump when trying to take him into custody for dirt bike racing. So there was just a long line of corruption going on in the Osceola County Sheriff's Office that was under investigation by my office. The Osceola County Sheriff had every reason to try to have me removed from office. And it, I don't think should come as a surprise to anyone that my removal happened before the investigation was concluded.
So our next question is, how has the suspension impacted you and the people in your county, and what your plans are now? But I'd also like to add to that, how has race been a factor in your situation, in your removal, in the disinformation, in all of the events surrounding your eventual dismissal by Ron DeSantis?
I think that it is naive of anyone to believe that race doesn't play a primary role in this. Why do we hate reform prosecutors? What is the problem with reform prosecutors all over the country? And the problem is this: if we change the criminal legal system, then we address the fact that the criminal legal system exists to give us a modern day form of slavery. That the criminal legal system exists for the disenfranchisement of Black and brown communities. When you have a criminal justice system that thrives on mass incarceration, and we know that mass incarceration is disproportionately of Black and brown people, then you understand why reforming that system is such a threat to white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, this all hinges on race. It all hinges on race, because if we stop incarcerating Black and brown people for things that are now legal, like marijuana and selling it, right, then we allow Black families to thrive. Then we allow them to create generational wealth. Then we allow the statistics regarding incarcerated children of incarcerated parents being likely to be incarcerated to be reduced. Then we allow the economics within Black and brown communities to thrive, because they don't have single parent and single family households, and they're able to contribute to their households generationally. So absolutely, this is all about race. Even if the elected prosecutor who's being targeted is not Black, this entire issue is about race.
And if I could interrupt, don't forget about the vote. The less people that are incarcerated, the more people there are that can vote.
Right. So there's that. But then also, to your question about the impact on my community, is the disenfranchisement of Black and brown voters. I was elected by nearly 67% of the vote. 397,000 people voted for me. And this is a majority Black and brown circuit. So yes, it is also the disenfranchisement of Black voters, brown voters. And we talked about, Disney and all of the, things that are happening here in Central Florida. Let there be no mistake about it. The attack on Disney, the attack on me, this is all retaliation for an area of voting bloc within the state of Florida that rejected Ron DeSantis.
So you mentioned reform prosecutors, and so that we were going to get to that, and it's a nice segue to the question. But reform prosecutors all over the country are being actually under attack. Chelsea Boudin was removed in San Francisco. The guy in Philadelphia, I can't remember his name now, he's constantly uh, yes, being threatened with recall and so forth. So, um, and you touched on why the reform of the criminal legal system is necessary, but I'm wondering now whether you all, any of you all, or you particularly, Monique, are wondering whether it was a mistake to try to reform from the inside.
No more of a mistake than any other resistance has been, right? Civil rights didn't come by just sitting back and, letting the injustices that were taking place happen. Just because we're under attack doesn't mean that we should stop what we're doing. It means that we should continue with full force exactly what we're doing. So no, I don't think it's a mistake at all. I'm running for re-election because I believe in this work.
Yeah.
And I think that it's something that we have to continue doing, and we have to not only continue doing it, but leave the legacy of doing it for our children.
You were a criminal defense, you were on the criminal defense side for a long time. So how is it that you wind up deciding that you can reform inside the prosecution?
Yeah, usually don't they start off as prosecutors and then go over to the defense when they haven't made any money being a prosecutor?
Right, exactly right. And that's one of the biggest problems, right, is that those of us who are doing this work typically come from defense backgrounds. So for me, it was leaving the University of Florida and wanting to do something else and reaching out to Aramis Ayala, my predecessor, to ask her if there was some opportunities at Florida A&M University College of Law. And she responded by saying, why don't you come and work with me and lead my conviction integrity unit? Now, at the time, I didn't know what a conviction integrity unit was. I had never heard of one, had never seen one. And my immediate response to her was, absolutely not. I don't want to be a prosecutor. And she said, well, take some time, look into it, and let me know what you think. So I began researching conviction integrity, and I was astounded to find that these are units within state attorney's offices that actually acknowledge the fact that wrongful convictions are a thing, that there was a whole database of the amount of wrongful convictions for which people had been exonerated in this country, that Florida actually led the nation in exonerations off death row, and that these were units that were trying to right these wrongs within the state attorney's office. So, heck yeah, that was absolutely right up my alley. And I said, yes, I will absolutely come and do that. So I went and I did it. And what became clear to me was that some of my worst fears as a defense attorney were true. The things that I knew was happening but could never prove, they were happening, and I was reading it right there in the file. The prosecutor who wrote, I don't have any evidence to prove that this guy did this, but I'm going to flip the co-defendant and tell them that if they don't testify, that they're going to get life in prison, and that they better testify in this guy's trial so that I can convict him because I don't have any other evidence. And that sure enough, the co-defendant, who was more culpable than the guy that the prosecutor was going after, testified and got a 12-year sentence while the co-defendant went down for life. And all of that was written in the file for everyone to see. And I knew that change in this system could not happen simply from me defending individuals one person at a time, that I needed to be at the helm of systemic change. And when my predecessor decided that she was not going to run again, I went to New York and worked for Reform Alliance, doing some criminal justice reform work with them. Then COVID hit, and we returned to Florida, and I filed for election. And I didn't know how it was going to work. I don't come from money. I didn't know a lot of people with money. My opponents in the race at that point in time had already been in, $100,000 or more in the race. But I knew that I had a perspective that was unique. They were all saying the same things and talking about the same things. They were all career prosecutors, and they all, wanted to continue the work of their predecessors. And I knew that my perspective as a career defense attorney and law professor was different, and that if I couldn't get elected off the different perspective, at the very least I needed to bring it to the table and force discussion around that perspective. So I filed, and then within a few months of me filing, George Floyd was murdered, Breonna Taylor was murdered, and it changed the discussion. It changed the discussion around what the role of a prosecutor was and what we should be doing. And my opponents were not able to respond to that. They didn't know if they should go march. They probably never had a inkling that, you know, inspired them to go and march. But I went and marched because I had always gone and marched. So quickly things turned in my favor, and I became the front runner in this, you know, election because people agreed that we needed change. And I was the only one in that field of candidates who could actually bring that change.
So I also heard you mention that it hasn't always been smooth with your constituents either. That there was a police shooting or something that occurred, and you weren't actually able to align with the community's desires on that particular issue. So tell us about that.
So while I was in between my primary and the general election, there was a police shooting of a kid at a mall, and he was shot in the back by law enforcement. Now, I just finished telling you that when George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery were murdered, that I marched with the people.
Right.
Well, they went out and marched, and I couldn't march. I knew that if I marched, they would take that case away and say that I had already made a decision before I had an opportunity to review the facts, and that I could not be objective in the prosecution of that case. So I didn't march, and the community was angry because they felt that I had betrayed them, that I had only marched about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery because I wanted to be elected. They didn't know my heart. They didn't know me, and they didn't understand that I was preserving my ability to maintain jurisdiction over that case.
Right.
But when I did get jurisdiction over the case, I conducted a thorough and in-depth investigation. And I wanted to prosecute that officer. If I'm just being honest, I did. I wanted to. He shot a black kid in the back while he was running away. So we hired the expert that was in the George Floyd case, and he reviewed the case, and he reviewed the investigation that law enforcement had conducted in the case. And law enforcement's investigation was insufficient at best, and so many other things that I could say about it. They didn't obtain videos. They didn't interview any of the witnesses that were there. They did so much to ensure that the case was not thoroughly investigated. But our expert, who was not local law enforcement, our expert who I believe was excellent in the conviction of Derek Chauvin in the murder of George Floyd, was able to show us that while the kid was running away, he had pulled the gun out of his waistband and had it in his hand at the time that he was shot. And that there was no way that I could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this officer was not rightly in fear for his safety when he shot at that kid.
Even though he was running
right.
in the opposite direction.
Even though he was running in the opposite direction. Here in Florida and many places around the country, officers have only to prove that they are in fear for their safety.
Right.
And when you have someone who is armed with a firearm and it is in their hand, and this can be proven, then there is no way that I could disprove that the officer was not in fear for his safety. And the reality is, I would not have, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. And one of the things that I had to come to grips with the community on is, Having someone who is in the seat who will fairly and accurately assess and evaluate the case doesn't mean that we now do what has been done to us for decades.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice. And inasmuch as I would not bring a case against a Black defendant who was charged with shooting someone who said that they were in fear for their safety when that individual had a gun in their hand, it is also not right for me to charge this white officer who said that he was in fear for his safety when the evidence shows that the person who he said he was in fear of had a gun in their hand. Yes, even though he was not facing the officer, there is enough evidence out there that people can shoot while also running away that would have justified this officer's fear. So in order for me to maintain credibility on either side, I have to do what is right all the time, even when I don't like it. And I didn't like it. I hated it. But it was the right thing to do.
It's a complicated situation when you're when you are the law enforcement, right? Things aren't always as black and white as people would believe. And also, you know, just the law, knowing the law puts you in a different category than the layperson, right? Because they sometimes don't understand the requirements. So it's complicated, and I don't envy you all who are trying to do the reform work from within the master's house. But we're running short. So let me ask you, what's the situation with you now? What's going on with your removal? Have you challenged it? You know, what can people do to help?
So I want to step back to the question about how have I been impacted by this.
Okay.
So I was removed, suspended without pay. And not only am I suspended without pay, but I'm also not able to practice law. Not because my bar license has been suspended, but because as the elected state attorney, I am prohibited by statute from the private practice of law. So even though I'm suspended, I'm still the elected state attorney. So what that means is that the only way that I've earned a living for the last 23 years, I'm not able to do it. So I've had to be creative, as we are. We are creative people. And I've opened a consulting firm where I go and, you know, give talks and work with nonprofits who are in this space to give them a legal perspective that a lot of them don't have, so that they understand when, you know, they say things, whether or not the things that they're striving for is realistic. And I have challenged the executive order in court. On September the 6th, we filed a lawsuit basically saying that the removal was unconstitutional because the governor, as a constitutional officer, and myself as a constitutional officer, he does not have the constitutional right to suspend me from office because he simply disagrees with my politics. That he would have to have shown that there was some neglect of duty or incompetence, and those are described very specifically in the law. And none of the accusations that he yielded actually met that standard. So the governor was supposed to respond to my lawsuit on October the 11th. Yesterday, he filed a motion for continuance for his response, essentially stating that, you know, he's very busy defending all the other constitutional violations that he has done across the state, and he just doesn't have time to get to this one right now.
As well as campaigning.
Right, as well as campaigning for president.
Right. So
we filed a response saying that, you know, the governor had a responsibility to know what his defenses were when he filed my executive order. Exactly. And that he had a year to file my executive order for my removal, so he should be able to defend it at this point. Now, let's be clear. The Supreme Court is, you know, 5 out of 7 appointed by Ron DeSantis. So it would be shocking to me that we were able to get justice out of the Florida Supreme Court. But it does not, again, mean that we shouldn't try.
And you're running again, you said. So
I am running for re-election.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how is all of this as you try to campaign for office again, um, how is this creating a situation for you that's untenable, between the disinformation and then the suits that you have going on and the money. The campaigning is, it's not done for free. You've got to raise money somehow.
Yeah, it is all very challenging. You know, there were, I was doing my gift reporting report last night, and in the month of my suspension, there were gifts of about $6,000 that came in from people who were just outraged by what had happened, and they understood, that it was going to be very difficult for me to earn a living with what has taken place. And then in September, there was $850.
Oh.
And what that means is that people have gone back to their lives, right?
Right.
And while I continue to fight this fight, life continues for everyone.
Right.
And I get that. I'm not faulting them, but that is the cycle of humanity, essentially. So I am, working really hard to try to find income opportunities where I can earn income for the support of my family while also raising money for the campaign. And the two compete with each other, because a lot of times when people will say, well, if I gave money to you, how can I then turn around and give money to your campaign? There's only so much money to go around, right? So it is a competing interest, but I have strength, and I'm drawing upon the strength of our ancestors. And, if they made it through the atrocities that they've suffered, I too will make it through this.
Mm.
Well, we're certainly going to hope that our listeners, because we do have some folks who listen from Florida, so
And they may have money.
and they may have money, so you never know. So we're going to do our best to help put the word out so that people know exactly what's going on with you down in that hell state, and to post your re-election campaign fund driving too. So we'll do the best we can, and we know you're time pressured, so we want to thank you so much for spending this time with us today so that we can help everyone know what's going on down in the hell state. Yeah, Ray, you have
And
something?
Michelle, if Monique wouldn't mind, if people do want to that listen to our show, that do want to make contributions and help your campaign, where would they do that? How would they make that happen?
I'll give you a couple of different things. There is a GoFundMe account for myself. If you go to GoFundMe and go under Monique Worrell, you'll pull up that account. My campaign is MoniqueForStateAttorney.com. It's Monique, FOR, StateAttorney.com. And then my consulting website is MoniqueHWorrell.com. If someone wants to come and have me speak and assist me with work in that way, it's MoniqueHWorrell.com.
Okay, so we'll also post all of that in the notes to the show.
Great.
As well as send out a separate message on that. So, because the sister and her family, they have to eat.
That's
while the work goes on.
Baby needs shoes.
There you go.
Yes. Yes.
And it's interesting.
My college senior.
Yeah, and
my high school senior, rather. My high school senior. Yeah.
Your baby's a senior in high school.
My baby, the one whose baby shower you attended, yes, he is a senior in high school.
That is too funny. They just don't stay little.
They don't.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Monique, so just so our listeners know, not only were you a student of mine, but you came back and you were a colleague of mine, and you are one of my top 10. You're in my rarefied group of top 10 law students that I've ever had the pleasure of talking to or working with. So I'm feeling.
And also to be noted is that you have been my mentor through the entire way. So I appreciate your modesty in calling me a colleague, but the reality is you've been my mentor through law school, through being a professor, and even now, and it's just been amazing to have you in this life journey with me.
Oh, thank you. I'm humbled by those great words.
I think I have to get a tissue. I'm sorry.
But this is a fighter, you all who are listening. So pay attention to what's going on. You know that the health state is what it is. And here is somebody in the health state who is trying to fight and uphold integrity and try to get a little bit of justice for people down there. So Monique, again, thank you so much for coming on. We are just privileged and happy to have had you.
Thank you very much, Monique.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And people need to also understand that this guy's running for president.
Yes.
So, let's not let that happen to the whole country.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, Michelle, us listening to Monique in this episode, you have to be, as her former law professor at the University of Florida, extremely proud of the effort that she's putting in the fight that she's waging.
Yeah, Monique is the example of what I would hope law students would get from having been exposed to me, that they have an obligation that's higher than just getting out there and making money, that particularly as Black attorneys, that we have an obligation to use our skills to help our communities. As her experience shows us, everyone must continue to focus on protecting and preserving the rights of our people fought to obtain. If you wish to help Monique continue to fight to protect our right to choose our elected leaders and to reform the criminal legal system, you can help in the following ways. Support her campaign for re-election. You can find her information at moniqueforstateattorney.com. A GoFundMe account has been set up to help her family survive this ordeal. So if you look for GoFundMe and you can put in her name, it's going to come up as a fight for democracy. You can support her that way. And if you're looking for a speaker on criminal legal reform, contact her at her consultancy, moniquehworrell.com. We'll make sure to put all the information on our webpage as well. Well, if you liked what you heard today, please visit our website at www.nubiantigerspodcast.com, where we post all episodes and a resource page with additional information on every podcast subject. You can also find us on YouTube on the Nubian Tigers Podcast channel. Our other social media is on Mastodon, where our handle is at Nubian Tigers Podcast at blacktwitter.io. Our podcast is hosted by Anchor M, which is now part of Spotify. But if you have a favorite podcast app, we're probably on it. Look for Nubian Tigers Talk. Looking forward to sharing some knowledge with you next time.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.